In the courtroom, we see Donald Trump for who he is. He's been convicted of 34 felonies, found liable for sexual assault, and he committed financial fraud. Meanwhile, Joe Biden's been working, lowering healthcare costs and making big corporations pay their fair share. This election is between a convicted criminal who's only out for himself and a president who's fighting for your family.
I'm Joe Biden, and I approve this message.
This right here is the ad that we've been waiting for. Here, the Biden campaign is signaling that it is finally leaning in on the reality that Donald Trump is a convicted felon. And what's especially striking is that this is the first foray into this topic that has otherwise been wholly ignored by Biden's campaign. And look, I understand why Biden has thus far refused to lean into this talking point. The Trump team has been beating this drum for months and months that Joe Biden is responsible for Trump's prosecution in New York and elsewhere. First of all, Biden didn't bring this prosecution. A local district attorney in Manhattan did. In fact, not only didn't Biden bring this case, his DOJ passed on it. Biden's Justice Department made the conscious decision not to prosecute Donald Trump when the evidence and this conviction clearly suggest that they could and should have. So no, it was not Joe Biden's fault that Trump had an affair and paid a porn star hush money and falsified business records to hide those payments, which, by the way, he knew was a crime because he had Michael Cohen make those payments for him. Otherwise, why not just make them yourself? Again, he knew what he was doing. That is not Biden's fault. It is not the Democrats' fault. It is Trump's fault and Trump alone. And yet, despite the fact that this prosecution had nothing to do with Joe Biden or his Justice Department, despite the fact that Biden's DOJ actually opted not to prosecute this case, despite the fact that this conviction was handed down by 12 jurors who Trump's own attorneys agreed to, still, the Trump team has been insisting that it's all Joe Biden's fault. And so given the fact that their criticism is untethered to reality and that they're going to blame Biden anyway, well, you might as well just lean in then and take advantage of Trump's massive vulnerability. In a way, Trump screwed himself here, because if he'd been honest, I know, and not blame Biden for something that Biden had nothing to do with, then Biden likely wouldn't have touched this issue. But because Trump went all in, then at this point, there is no downside to broaching this topic. Biden's shouldering the blame as far as Trump's base is concerned anyway, so at this point, he might as well just make the case that Trump is a dangerous convicted felon to the rest of America. And that, mind you, is where Trump really fucked up. Because here's the deal. Trump blaming Biden for the conviction isn't changing anything within Trump's base. They already hate Biden. They're already voting for Trump. Sure, they hate Biden more now, but a Trump vote is a Trump vote. The difference is that now that there's no reason for Biden not to avoid this topic, he can make this case to undecided voters, and those people are way less swayed by this notion that Biden is running a weaponized justice system and much more receptive to Biden's attack that Trump is a dangerous convicted felon and that you shouldn't vote for him for that reason. And don't take my word for it, look at the polling. According to the latest Politico Ipsos poll, among political independents, 32% of them said that a conviction made them less likely to support Trump. Only 12% of them said that it made them more likely to support Trump. In other words, sure, Trump may derive some marginal benefit from this narrative that he himself is perpetuating. 12% of independents in this poll agree with him, but nearly 3 times as many are stepping away from him as the result of it. 32%. And again, this was his idea. He is the one who's been hammering away at this issue. He's the one who's basically given the green light to Joe Biden to give him permission to broach this issue. And now he's worse off as the result of it. But hey, Donald Trump, political genius, am I right? Of course, as far as this ad is concerned, don't count out the media to help run cover for Trump. Here's the New York Times headline this morning following the release of the ad. Biden's campaign ad paints Trump as a felon. Yeah, maybe the reason it paints him that way is because Trump is quite literally a felon. Now, where have we heard this before? Right.
And for every time the Biden campaign uses the shameful word convicted felon, they are not talking about inflation.
How dare anyone call a convicted felon a convicted felon? I mean, what's next? Firefighter paints the blazing inferno that burned down a house as a fire? Doctor paints ICU patient as being sick? And then, of course, deigning to concede objective reality, the New York Times eventually changed the headline to Biden campaign ad calls attention to Trump's felon status. And look, yes, it is good that they changed it, and no, it is not good that the paper of record in the United States of America seems incapable of admitting to objective reality, if doing so give the optics of politicization. Someone should tell the New York Times that it is okay to acknowledge reality even outside of the confines of a both sides narrative. You don't need to also shit on a Democrat or equivocate in some way if you're going to admit that Donald Trump is a convicted felon. The mainstream media in this country is so desperate not to seem like it has a liberal bias that in fact it bends over backwards to pander to conservatives. And by the way, my upcoming book, Shameless, goes deep on this issue of the both sides media, which is obviously an issue that I'm especially passionate about. This book is available for pre-order right now, so if you'd like to dive into this topic with me and support my work, please click the link right here on the screen or in the post description of this video to pre-order, or you can go to briantylercohen.com/book. I really appreciate it, and thank you in advance. So look, Trump will run with this idea that it's somehow dangerous now to hold criminals to account, although I'm not especially sure that the whole "if they can convict me, they can convict you" shtick is going to gain much traction. And Stephen Colbert made that case pretty convincingly.
The day after convicted felon Donald Trump was convicted of his felonies, he staged his own mini meltdown in the lobby of Trump Tower.
This is a case where if they can do this to me, they can do this to anyone.
It's true. No, it is true. Just think about that. If it could happen to him, it could happen to anyone who commits crimes, no matter who they are.
The fact is that everyone opposed to Donald Trump and who recognizes the danger of another Trump presidency should 100% lean in on the fact that he's a felon. Not because this was some coup orchestrated by the evil communist Marxist Democrats to commit election interference or whatever other desperate narratives Republicans are trying to promote, but because it shows the extent to which he is gravely, aggressively, clearly, and uniquely unfit to hold office. And to their credit, a lot of people, left, right, and center, are rightfully beating this drum.
Look, I get it. They're angry. Okay. You have nominated a convicted felon now who can't own a gun, would lose a security clearance if he was in the military, and would be discharged from the military right now. I'm sorry that you nominated this guy as your front runner, but it doesn't mean you now have permission to stand in front of the American people to lie to them.
His competitor is a convicted felon. And you can only imagine if the situation was reversed, they would be going after Joe Biden with a vengeance. They're making those false claims about Joe Biden regardless. So I think not only the president, but Democrats need to be making the case forcefully to the American people. If you want something done about housing and how unaffordable it can be, you don't want a convicted felon in the Oval Office just looking out for themselves. You want something done about child care. You don't want a convicted felon in the Oval Office. You want the country run properly. You don't want a convicted felon to turn the Oval Office and the federal government into some kind of a racketeering operation. I think that's a powerful case to make, and certainly one supported by the verdict here.
Look, I don't think the semantics are important here. I think what's important is that the American people know that somebody who is the Republican nominee for president of the United States is a convicted felon. And I think we see the split screen of President Biden on the world stage, a global stage, a domestic stage, trying to deliver for Americans, and Donald Trump railing against democracy, railing against the judicial system, continuing to double down on calls for political violence and extremism. And so our campaign is going to continue to stay focused and make sure we're highlighting that contrast in full display for American voters.
So good on the Biden campaign for recognizing the need to highlight this issue, an issue that they had nothing to do with, by the way, but an issue they should 100% exploit because, again, it was not their fault that Donald Trump was convicted by a jury of his peers for committing a crime so obvious that even Michael Cohen went to prison for his involvement in it at the direction of Donald Trump. He cannot be trusted to run a business, a charity, and certainly not a country. And this latest conviction is just one more proof point out of thousands that he shouldn't be allowed within 100 miles of the levers of power. I've got a really exciting announcement. I've written a book. It's called Shameless. This book explores how Republicans have exploited their historical branding while attacking our democracy, how the media has proven itself a willful participant, and how Democrats can learn from this to rebalance the political scales and save our democracy. It has been a lifelong dream of mine to write my own book, and so I'd like to ask you to pre-order it by clicking the link right here on the screen. And if you buy within this pre-order period, your book is going to come with a signed nameplate. As you know, I've never had a single sponsor on my channel. I don't ask for money or anything like that, but if you're looking for a way to support me, this is hands down the best way to do it. So again, follow the link right here on the screen, and thank you from the bottom of my heart for pre-ordering Shameless. And as always, make sure to subscribe to see more of my content.